Welcome to The Deep Dive, the place where we take on some really complex material, filter it down, and give you the essential, genuinely fascinating insights.
And today we are really getting into it.
We are. Today we're undertaking one of our deepest dives yet. We're going on a journey into the work of Carl Jung, looking at his theories through a very specific evolutionary lens.
That's absolutely right. I mean, when you start reading Jung, you're just struck by the sheer scale of his thought. He wasn't just doing therapy, he was really creating a cosmology.
A whole worldview.
Exactly. And our mission today is to look at Jung as the Darwin of the mind. We want to focus on the big philosophical implications of his ideas, specifically how human consciousness evolved and why there's reason to think that evolution is far from over.
I think that phrasing the Darwin of the mind is the perfect hook. It leads right to this core premise. If consciousness evolved, then we right now are still deeply unconscious in some really crucial ways. We think we operate from pure rationality, but Jung would say that rationality is just, a tiny boat on a massive, mostly submerged ocean.
And that ocean is where these collective blind spots come from. The sources we looked at use some powerful historical moments to illustrate this idea of collective unconsciousness, what Jung called shadow behavior.
Let's start with maybe the biggest example they gave, the Cuban Missile Crisis. You've got two highly educated world leaders, right? Both are totally convinced they're acting rationally in the best interest of their nations.
Of course.
And yet they're holding humanity hostage, ready to risk total annihilation.
And that brinksmanship just wasn't rational. It was shadow behavior, played out on a global stage. The crisis happened because neither side could recognize its own capacity for, destructive ignorance or fear or that repressed brutality.
It just projected it.
Completely. They projected those darker qualities entirely onto the other side. As long as you believe the evil is out there, you can justify any destructive behavior in here.
But if that projection is so automatic, so deep, how can you expect anyone to recognize their own shadow in a moment like that? I mean, can rationality even step in?
Well, that is the work of consciousness. That's the evolutionary leap. It's that moment when a leader pauses and asks, hang on, is it possible that part of the recklessness I see in my opponent is a mirror of the recklessness I'm carrying?
That self-reflection.
That's the whole game. And the sources give a really chilling domestic example of this too. They point to the American South in the 1950s, a society full of people who were in many other ways decent and kind, and yet they upheld this brutal system of segregation.
Right.
They had these repressed dispositions they found intolerable, maybe a fear of chaos, a sense of cultural inferiority, who knows, and they projected those faults entirely onto the segregated group. They were unconscious of the revulsion they were projecting, which allowed segregation to be, rationalized as necessary.
So consciousness, in this context, wasn't about being smarter.
Not at all. It was about the profound inability to achieve psychological insight into the minds of those they were harming. It's a powerful lesson that so much of history is driven not by malice, but by mass self-ignorance.
Okay, so we've established that we are incomplete, that we're evolving. Let's trace this back. How did Jung, the psychologist, connect his work to Darwin, the biologist?
So his starting point was basically Darwin. He said, look, if everything in biology is explained by Darwin, then that has to include consciousness itself.
It has to.
The consciousness we have arose from an inherited psychic structure, the collective unconscious, and that structure is organized by archetypes. And these archetypes, he argued, evolve through natural selection, just like our physical instincts.
So the collective unconscious is the blueprint of the psyche, something we all inherit, and it contains these universal archetypes. But let's define that. What exactly is an archetype? Because that term gets misused a lot.
It's so crucial to get this right. They are not inherited ideas. They're not specific thoughts. They are inherited modes of functioning, like a disposition to form certain images or patterns.
Okay.
Jung used this analogy of a crystal forming in mother fluid. The inherited structure dictates the potential pattern of the crystal, the four-sidedness, the unique angles. But the final specific expression of that crystal is totally unique to its time and place.
Right, so the pattern, the blueprint for the hero, for instance, is universal. But the specific symbol we use to express that, whether it's Gilgamesh or Luke Skywalker, that changes with the culture.
Precisely. And even the instincts we think of as purely biological, like a duckling imprinting on its mother, that's a complex inherited behavior with a psychic side. Jung said the archetypes, like mother or child, lie at the very root of these instincts, forming the foundation of the collective unconscious.
And for you, the listener, This is why when you look at myths from all over the world, you see the same characters popping up. The trickster, the wise old man, the shadow. They show up in cultures that never had any contact.
Because they're universal organizing factors in the mind.
Exactly.
And we can actually trace this psychic evolution. You can see it by observing how these archetypes change in a culture over time. This is really detailed in the work of Jung's follower, Erich Neumann. The level of consciousness a society has achieved is mirrored perfectly in its myths, its art, its rituals.
And that first glimmer of consciousness, the ego just starting to emerge from the purely biological world, is dominated by the Great Mother archetype.
Right. She represents that dark, watery flux of the deep unconscious, the earth, fertility, the whole thing.
And this stage gives rise to the sun lover myth. He's this symbol of early, fragile consciousness, phallic imagery, life springing forth, but he's transient. He has to be sacrificed back into the Great Mother.
The focus is entirely on the cycles. Birth, death, renewal. It reflects those early fertility-focused societies.
What I find so compelling here is that there's actual archaeological proof for this. The sources bring up the work of Jacques Cauvin on the Neolithic Revolution.
Yes, this is fascinating. Cauvin showed that this monumental shift in human civilization, the start of agriculture, wasn't primarily driven by things like climate change or food shortages. I mean, the resources and the tech were there for millennia, just unexploited.
So the breakthrough wasn't technological, it was internal. Humanity wasn't psychologically ready for it?
Precisely. Cauvin saw this sudden, dramatic shift in the art. The depictions changed from just, animals to focusing exclusively on female figurines, the Great Mother Goddess.
Wow.
And often she was alongside a secondary bull figure, which symbolizes the sun lover. This cultural shift, this emergence of a new divine principle, is what launched the Neolithic Revolution. The psyche changed, and then the entire world followed.
So to evolve further, the ego then has to achieve this next great feat, separation. Has to break away from the Great Mother, the unconscious, which then transforms mythologically into the terrible mother.
The dragon.
The dragon, the monster you have to defeat.
And that separation is always a heroic act, but it carries this psychic cost. It's often symbolized by guilt or punishment. I mean, the acquisition of consciousness is so often depicted as an original sin.
Adam and Eve getting kicked out of the garden for gaining knowledge.
Or Prometheus being tortured for stealing fire from the gods. That feeling of conscience, of remorse that comes with responsibility, that's the price of separation.
But what about the speed of this? Biological evolution is so slow. How did culture accelerate it all?
Consciousness introduced a fast-track adaptive mechanism. Culture. Our myths, our education systems, our social structures, they function like natural selection, but for ideas.
So culture preserves the successful, felicitous encounters between individuals and the archetypes. It's evolution, but without genetics.
Right. It follows the same 3 steps. Replication through teaching, chance mutation, a new idea from an individual, and selection. Does that new idea work in the environment? This allows for explosive, non-genetic psychic growth.
Okay, so the collective evolution gets us to a certain baseline of consciousness. Now we get to the individual journey, what Jung called individuation, the quest for psychic wholeness.
And the key to this whole process is realizing that the unconscious isn't just, a filing cabinet for repressed stuff like Freud initially focused on. It's a dynamic, autonomous entity. Its role is fundamentally compensatory.
Meaning it balances things out.
It acts as a balancing force to the conscious ego, always pushing back against one-sidedness.
And the map of that conscious ego is the quaternity. The 4 functions of consciousness organized into 2 pairs of opposites, thinking and feeling, and sensation and intuition.
And the whole problem is their incompatibility. You can't, for instance, apply pure thinking, which is intellectual judgment, without suppressing feeling, which is value judgment. They're mutually exclusive in the moment.
We could see that in the trial lawyer analogy they used. A sensation-based lawyer is inductive. They gather all the external verifiable facts first, and then build their case from the ground up.
Whereas an intuitive lawyer is deductive. They start with an internal theory, a hunch about how the case should flow, and then they look for facts to confirm that big picture.
And the danger is obvious. Too much sensation, and you miss the big picture. Too much intuition, and you ignore facts that contradict your hunch.
And the individuation process, which usually kicks off in the second half of life, is the painful work of integrating those opposites, especially the inferior function, the one we're worst at, the one that often feels childish or embarrassing to us.
We repress it because it makes us feel incompetent.
Exactly. Yet, the work of wholeness requires the ego to stop thinking it's the whole show. It has to yield its central place to the true center of the personality, the self.
The self archetype, that internal image of wholeness, it's universally symbolized by these circular fourfold figures like a mandala or the old chemical goal of squaring the circle.
Because it represents the integration of those four functions. Jung scientifically treats the self as the inbuilt image of God in the psyche. He's very clear. He's looking at the psychic reality. He leaves the question of whether there's a real metaphysical God to the theologians.
The psychological reality is enough.
It's more than enough.
So once the ego is secure, the hero's task shifts. It's no longer about external aggression, about slaying the dragon. It's about securing the pearl of great price, which is integration. And the feminine heroic journey is a beautiful model for this.
Look at Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz. Her journey isn't about killing a monster. It's about integrating the four functions, which are represented by her companions.
The scarecrow is thinking. The Tin Woodman is feeling.
And the cowardly lion is sensation or intuition. She brings her whole quaternity of companions to wholeness, and she achieves this higher consciousness seen through the wizard's facade, not through conquest, but through empathy. And crucially, she does it without this huge, overt break from her maternal figure, from Aunt Em and home. It's integration, not aggressive separation.
Which is a huge contrast to the masculine journey.
Massively. For the masculine ego, the climax of individuation can be this death of the hero phase. Jung himself had a dream where he had to kill the hero Siegfried. This symbolized that his old attitude, his dominating will, was no longer suitable. It had to die to yield to the integrating authority of the self.
You have to kill your own ambition to become whole.
It's a painful but necessary death.
Okay, so now we move from the deeply personal to the cosmic. Because Jung believed there was an a priori ordering principle to the universe itself. This is where we get into his most challenging idea. Synchronicity.
Yeah, this is a tough one for a lot of people. He defined it as the non-causal linkage between psychic and physical events, meaningful coincidences that causality just cannot explain.
They show the interpenetration of psyche and matter.
Right, and the famous scarab story is a perfect example. Jung was treating this very rational, very stuck patient. She needed a breakthrough. She tells him about a powerful dream she had about being given a golden scarab, an ancient symbol of rebirth.
A symbol of transformation.
And as she's telling him this, Jung hears a tapping on the window behind him. He opens it, and a common rose chafer, a scarab beetle, flies into the room. A completely non-causal physical event mirrored the deep subjective meaning of her dream at that exact moment.
That is just profound.
Yeah.
And what's wild is how this causal idea is now finding unexpected resonance in modern science, particularly high-level physics.
It does. The sources highlight that quantum mechanics fundamentally challenges our classical notion of causality at the subatomic level.
Can you make that a bit more tangible for listeners who aren't physicists? Why does quantum mechanics set causality aside?
Well, think of the observer effect. The very act of measuring a subatomic particle changes its state. Before you observe it, its position doesn't really exist in a fixed, definite way. The mind, through observation, seems to collapse possibility into a single reality.
Which breaks that classical A causes B chain.
It shatters it. It requires a radical restructuring of what we even mean by reality. And that opens the door for Jung's idea. If cause and effect isn't an absolute law, then a causal ordering principle like synchronicity could be totally plausible.
It could be part of the fabric of the universe.
Exactly. Leading thinkers like Heisenberg and Penrose have entertained models where consciousness isn't just something the brain does. It might be a fundamental, irreducible quality of the universe. It's built in, not bolted on.
Which would support Jung's view that time and space might just be thresholds of consciousness. Like how our eyes only see a tiny sliver of the light spectrum. Our minds organize reality using these constraints, but the underlying reality might exist completely outside of them.
So if we pull all this together, the knowledge of psychology becomes absolutely essential for understanding the objective world, because the symbols and spiritual stories that give life meaning, they spring directly from the soil of the unconscious.
And the self-archetype provides that necessary image of wholeness, that image of God, that galvanizes the human spirit and fuels the quest for meaning.
And you can see the proof that this process works, historically. Jung's evolutionary model says that consciousness drives moral progress. It's why we can answer that question. Have we truly progressed?
Absolutely. The great Greek philosophers, Socrates, Plato, they were intellectual giants, but they lived comfortably with slavery. That is now unthinkable among civilized peoples. We are not necessarily smarter, but we are more conscious. The collective unconscious means we all share the greater part of our psyche, making the brotherhood of man a clearer, more fixed reality.
So the fullest consciousness becomes the essential condition for making ethical judgments. You have to know yourself before you can justly judge the world.
Which leaves us with a final provocative thought for you to take with you. The path to meaning is the pursuit of a spiritual goal, one that's implicit in this individuation process. Jung called this an absolute necessity for the health of the soul. That means the quester, you, must ultimately be guided not by what society demands, but by your own sound, conscious judgment. A judgment you can only achieve through a courageous and humble relationship with the depths of your own unconscious.
It requires deep listening, honesty, and a willingness to stop confusing your ego's desires with reality itself.
And that's the work we hope to guide you through, one deep dive at a time. Thank you for tuning in.